We all gathered here today to witness, of course, the sermon of Saint John Doyle and the sinner Hunter Avallone, who will debate upon the holy debate podiums. There's a picture on this one, no clue why, and they're both in suits. All of this is cringe. There's American flags. Literally all of this is cringe to me. I would never partake in such an event. What a sanctimonious, butthole licking in a bad way type of event. However, slurp slurp, I'll watch this. Let's watch. I don't know who this is. I don't care.
And you've had a great time enjoying them. Now I get to see them in person.
Cool. Dope. Awesome. Great. Now you go stand up. This is sped up a little bit for time. If it's incomprehensible, we'll turn it down. Let me see what the volume's like before I might change the volume. Let's get a test.
Now, before we start, the debate rules for both you guys.
Sounds fun.
We'll be answering the question tonight, should America return to traditional gender roles? You'll each have a 10 minutes to give an open statement.
Traditional gender roles is the debate? Wow, what a worthy topic.
But you guys agreed that he would do a 15 one and you would do a 5-minute closing statement at the end. So we will have...
Oh, God, the core of our fucking society. Gender roles. You gonna learn today. Thanks for 24 months. 24 bit. Hey, let's go. Let's go. That's a toddler, dude. You and I, honestly, we've been taking care. We've been very attentive for 24 months. So I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Texas sports and shit. You know, I forgive you. It's fine. It's fine. You'll come around.
Segments and a crossfire in between. The first segment, each debate will get 5 minutes each, and then another round 5 minutes each. And then we'll go to the crossfire. Then we'll have a second segment where we'll have 5 minutes each again, another 5 minutes each to respond. And then we'll have 10 minutes of closing statements per debater.
Okay. Early fit check. John Doyle is in a better fit here. I'm not a fan of the coat. However, the problem is, although the fit is better, they're standing in front of like 12 people. He's overdressed. So, yeah. The vibe here is dorks. Even though I like Hunter to some extent. I'm not trying to be mean to Hunter. Still dorks. They would think I'm a schlub anyways. It's whatever. I don't care. Just not my vibe, man. In fact, I hope you felt fly as fuck.
There'll be a 20-minute Q&A at the end. All questions are welcome, and anything's up for grabs. We will start a line right here, and then that'll be everything. There are no prepared notes, but you can prepare your openings, and you do have notepads that you can write anything you want on. So, without further ado, John, let's kick things off.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Nope.
We're testing the audio. Is that a yes? Very good. Well, good evening. I would like to...
Wow, okay. Real fucking quiet. Nice! Is it going to have a point where the volume increases and then John's going to be way too fucking loud?
Thank everybody for coming out this evening. Even those who came out in the protest to protest against Hunter and myself, the two cis white men. You know, these are the real revolutionaries, right? It gets a little bit cold out, and all of a sudden fighting the fascists isn't so appealing. But these are the people who would have held Stalingrad, right? No, but Hunter and I, we had a real sort of Venom and Sandman moment behind the stage. I was like, look, you want to kill the SJWs. I want to kill the SJWs. Together, they don't stand a chance. Interesting. Okay, look, it's uncensored America, right? If you don't have like a playful death threat here and there, is it really free speech? Probably not. But anyways, this is the most professionally organized event that I've ever done, and I know that
I'll fight John Doyle.
Hunter said the same as well backstage. So thank you to Uncensored America for putting this on. Thank you, of course, to the security for putting this on. Can we get a round of applause for them for doing such a fantastic job? So, the topic that we will be debating this evening is, of course, whether America should return to traditional gender roles. I believe that we absolutely should, and my opponent this evening disagrees. And so for the sake of intelligent discussion, I would hope that we can avoid the sort of sophomore characterizations of these traditional gender roles as oppressive and evil, because they aren't. They're quite the opposite, actually. Contrary...
But... I guess I'll wait.
These roles,
thanks for the biddies. I won't wait for you, though. John would view Hunter as a loser, yet Hunter is married and has 2 kids and a home. John is none of those. Hunter's more of a trad man than John. I'm going to assume Hunter brings that up, but maybe not.
They were involved in their communities, they enjoyed different hobbies and projects, they owned businesses, etc. But ultimately, both men and women understood that their ultimate purpose was to raise boys to be good men, good husbands, and good fathers, and to raise girls to be good women, good wives, and good mothers.
Yeah, but the good there is operative, dude, because you think what makes a good woman is subservience. Not every woman wants to be subservient. Some do.
Those who tend to sympathize with the views expressed by my opponent tend to regard those roles as not only harmful, but as socially constructed. Therefore, I believe that the crux of this debate this evening will be a difference of worldview, nature versus nurture, genetics versus environment, what our role is here on Earth, etc. With traditional gender roles, gender stereotypes, I would simply recall the Supreme Court precedents on pornography. You know it when you see it. We're all familiar with these. The question is, where do they come from? Those who tend to sympathize with my opponent would believe that things like race, like nationality, childhood, madness, age, intelligence, beauty, that these things are all social constructs, gender roles included, that they only exist because for whatever reason we, typically white men, have decided that they should. This is of course not the case. Men and women are fundamentally different, their behavior is different, their temperament is different. And this is much more related to their biology than to their environment. Behavior is biological. Think about what gender role even means. Gender as a word containing the prefix gen, like genesis, generation, generate, meaning coming to be, followed by der, like dermatology, taxidermy.
I'm bored, don't care.
So gender literally means your biological role in coming together and creating new flesh, creating life. Therefore, any gender role that you might have, by definition, would be your role in cultivating stable families and stable children, and by extension, stable societies.
You have to define stability, John. Like he just says stuff. Like, this is why conservatives don't come talk to me, because they have to answer questions. And I frustrate them greatly. I make them so fucking mad. I don't know why. Conservatives should come talk to me, though. Not in this setting, though. That's lame. Just this setting. Not my home, though. You're not invited. But, like, just chill in your home on stream, and we just literally just talk. I just want to know stuff and have a conversation. But these dudes get so fucking butt mad about, like, well, what do you mean by that, John? And it's just like, what do you and you just fucking vomit on you. It's weird. I believe in demons, okay? I think you're a demon. Okay, well, I guess we're talking past each other today.
Our biological drives and instincts, whether you look at it from an evolutionary perspective or from a religious perspective, are oriented towards reproduction.
Corn suit. I'm not in my corn suit today, Chad. I'm in my Caucasian suit. You could put me in the corn suit, though, next time. Tonight, maybe?
And because of that, these gender roles and gender stereotypes are completely syndicated all throughout the world and all throughout history. With so much difference between all of these cultures and all of these time periods, it really makes you wonder why the only thing that they have in common besides these gender roles is human biology. Any honest preschool teacher or any honest parent can testify to the average differences between boys and girls. And in English, the word that we have to describe those who insist that there are no innate differences between the sexes.
English teacher? Any English teacher could tell you the innate differences between boys and girls. God, he has such a fucking, like, baby brain.
Is childless. This is your average feminist, of course, as we know. But let's experiment. Suppose that you were a visitor to a previously unknown society. You discover another continent or something. You gave the members of that society a test requiring them to identify the gender of a random person from that society described by a series of adjectives. One is described as sentimental, submissive, superstitious, affectionate, dreamy, sensitive, attractive, dependent, emotional, fearful, soft-hearted, and weak. The other is
femboy.
Described as adventurous, dominant, forceful, independent, strong, aggressive, autocratic, daring, enterprising, robust, stern, active, courageous, progressive, meaning
mommy. Did I get it right?
Continuing, rude, severe, unemotional, and wise. What is the likelihood that the members of that society will identify the former gender as male?
Unemotional and wise.
And the latter as female. Well, a cross-cultural study of gender stereotypes conducted by John Williams and Deborah Best suggests that the answer is virtually zero. Respondents in at least 23 of the 25 countries studied associated each of the first set of adjectives, each individual one, not just all cumulatively, with females, and the second set with males. Moreover, since gender roles are inherently sexual in that is what unites...
So his argument is that gender roles are biological, and then to illustrate the point, he appeals to a social study? That's fascinating, John. That is a fascinating way to go about it. Wow. Sounds like we got our big brain out today, didn't we, John? Just pumped it with brain force for this opening speech. It's going great.
Man and woman, insight into the truth of these can be found through what each sex is attracted to in a mate. If these roles are socially conditioned, then it should make no difference, especially not throughout the world in cultures that don't have our level of Western enlightenment. But evolutionary psychologist David Buss studied mate preferences in 37 different cultures over 5 years, and he found that women's and men's ideal mates were stable and differed very little by culture. Whether women were from Iran or Vietnam or wherever else in the world, they valued material resource, social status, and ambition in men much more than physical appearance.
Jared Follarder! Thanks for the raid, dude. We're watching this. John Doyle has started out, you just missed it, John Doyle started out this debate saying that gender roles are biologically essential, and then to illustrate that, appealed to a study he appealed to a social study of people being polled on whether or not they felt certain adjectives were masculine or feminine. As you can see, it is going great.
And I bet you can guess what the men valued. which was them being young and physically attractive. Moreover, once the designers of the study knew what an anonymous person's preferences or ideals were in a mate, they could predict the sex of that person with 92% accuracy. Sounds to me like no matter where you are, women want confident providers and men want beautiful women, and we wonder why feminists are mad. So what is attractive in males and females is attractive because it implies how they will suit the role that we desire them for. Desirable traits in males imply the role of the provider and the protector, and desirable traits in women imply the role of the mother. If our society is to have a future...
You know how all your moms are hot? True. Look, I wouldn't fuck every mom, but I'll fuck yours.
And it will require men and women to get together and have children. And if there are roles and behaviors that we're biologically predisposed to pursue, then it is better to pursue them than to fight reality and just be miserable. So those like my opponent will have to explain why Western social constructs actually have a greater impact and syndication on the world and can explain this better than simple biology, and why this has been the case for virtually all of human history. Why has there never been a matriarchal society where all the men throughout the world just sending letters back and forth with notes on how to oppress women?
That is not what? There's never been matriarchal societies. What the fuck? They exist now.
No, male leadership is rooted in biology. But despite our universal awareness of these traits, we're told that they are stereotypes, which is to say it's bad to recognize patterns. Despite
also, for the record, one of the sexes has a distinct disadvantage in free time if they are forced to carry around babies. So yeah.
Stereotype accuracy is actually one of the most replicable
This is absolutely sped up.
effects
I'm
discovered
a little
in social
pressed for
psychology.
time.
Sure, stereotypes may be
We'll see
bad.
if
We're
we'll
all
make
taught
it through.
that people on like Mars are a certain way, which causes us to think inaccurately of them. But men and women
to
interact with each
pick
other
the
constantly for
lady
their
up
entire
from the
lives.
airport.
And the idea that the average person would ignore a lifetime of personal experience just to subconsciously uphold some sort of unfounded myth just simply defies belief. Most studies of stereotype accuracy have shown them to be accurate generalizations relying on probability rather than category, meaning acknowledging the existence of tendencies can coexist with acknowledging the existence of outliers. For example, there's an overwhelming empirical evidence of sex differences in temperament. In a review of sex difference research, psychologist Alice Eagley found that existing research refutes 4 commonly asserted claims about sex differences: that they are
Jake and the
small,
gays.
inconsistent from study to study, artifactual, and
I don't
inconsistent
care,
with
John.
stereotypes. Eagley notes that despite frequent repetition of such claims, it is not cultural stereotypes that have been shattered by contemporary psychological research, but rather the scientific consensus forged in the feminist movement in the 1970s. But maybe those differences do exist. But it's because of socialization and environmental conditioning. Okay, how can we test that? Presumably by looking at children, right? Since the period during which they would have been socialized into believing these things would be the shortest. Well,
What? By looking at children? If you want to know how people feel about gender roles, just ask them. As adults, not as children. If the thing about gender roles is this: don't enforce them. The role your gender plays should be nothing. The role you play, irrespective of your gender, is totally different. Now, if you're like John and you're a conservative cishet and you want a trad wife situation, go for it. I don't care. There's lots of people that are into that life. That's fine with me. No fucking problem with you choosing that for yourself. But you try to choose that for me, I'll fuck you, John. John, I will fuck you.
Well, from a young age, boys are far more competitive than girls. Even in preschool, they engage in more competitive activities than girls. Moreover, a study of 2nd through 12th graders revealed
You will
that
be
girls
my
reported
trad
stronger
wife,
attitudes
John.
about cooperation and weaker attitudes about competition in all grades than did boys. Janet Lever's famous study of how children play reflects this as well. Young boys are far more likely to engage in games, meaning play where there is specific competitive goals, while girls are far more likely to engage in play, things without explicit goals or competition like hopscotch, jump rope, etc. And even that competition is actually indirect because it's through turn taking instead of more explicit in the moment competition like boys engage in. And of course, domination and leadership are forms of competition as well.
Domination and leadership? John doesn't dominate or lead. What the fuck is he talking about? This is insane stuff from a little boy. I don't know why tiny boy wife Doyle, that's great, yeah. I don't know why boy wife Doyle thinks that he's dominant. Who was it? I think it was a mutual of mine on Twitter. She tweeted something to the effect of, sorry, Shoe-on-Head. Not really, but sorry, Shoe-on-Head, you're getting wrapped up in this. Shoe-on-Head dates fascist guys because they have, like, she confuses authoritarian politics with actual bedroom dominance. Same shit here. He thinks because he's a fascist, he's going to be good in bed. Let me just tell you this, guys, okay? Only one of us right here is a dom, and it ain't Hunter, and it ain't fucking John, okay? It's your boy. If you want to come, you come to me. You come to the Cobb. You don't go to Doyle land. And we know that because this guy ain't fucking.
Dominance behaviors are those intended to achieve or maintain a position of high relative status, to obtain power, influence, resources, all the things that women want, etc. And studies have shown that when children get together, even in preschool years, dominance hierarchies emerge spontaneously. Some children are far more influential and less subject to aggression by others. Boys engage in a significantly greater amount of dominance play related than girls do, such as playing with weapons, engaging in rough and tumble play, and then also in mixed sex groups in nursery schools, boys end up disproportionately at the top of the classroom hierarchy. This is very important because little boys and little girls are basically equal at that age physically. So if male dominance throughout world history is only due to this later developed strength, you'd expect there to be a delay in these behaviors, but there aren't. It's instinctual. Even among mixed group of 33-year-old toddlers, girls are far more likely to listen to instructions from boys than vice versa.
Do you think, John, that would have anything to do with them being socialized to do so? Oh, okay. He says that this is all inborn, and he's using the examples of Western children in a Western country with families that are traditionally conservative. Okay. God damn you. Redeeming, say something nice. All right, John Doyle. The nicest thing I can say about John Doyle is that it looks like he's hydrated, and that's good. You should be hydrated, chat. You should also be hydrated. Mr. Feeney, the box means pussy. If you're a cishet dude and you don't eat pussy, what are you doing? More for me, I guess. More for me, and I'm hungry.
Male leadership is just natural. The historical record is perfectly clear. Men have generally achieved status through dominance of other men, and women have generally achieved status through their associations with high-status men, sometimes even by competing with women for them. Not surprisingly, in same-sex pairings, a high-dominance individual will assume a leadership position over a low-dominance individual. However, when a high-dominance woman is paired with a low-dominance man, the man actually tends to assume the leadership role.
A high-dominance woman.
But rather because the woman selected him to be the leader. Conversely, females in all known societies exhibit more nurturing behavior than males both inside and outside of the family.
Oh my fucking God. I'm getting second-hand virginity from this. This is ridiculous. I'm going to have to fuck immediately.
Women who are the primary caretakers of the young, the sick, and the old. Psychological studies tend to confirm that women are more empathetic than men, regardless of age or the measures used, which is, of course, substantially correlated with nurturing behavior. And females of all ages tend to be person-oriented, while males tend to be object-oriented. As early as their first year of life, girls pay more attention to people, and boys pay more attention to inanimate objects. When shown identical photographs, males have a greater tendency to report seeing objects, while females do it with seeing different people. Differences in orientation affect the way that people perceive themselves. Women's self-identity and self-esteem tend to be centered around sensitivity and their relations to others, while a man's self-concept tends to be centered around task performance, independence, dominance, things of that nature. And one study showed that 50% of women, but only 15% of men agreed with the statement as to when I can succeed at something that will also make other people happy. This provides insight into the differences between male and female depression. And females, on average, outperform males on language skills right out of the womb. They typically start speaking earlier and advance to whole sentences sooner than baby boys. Males do catch up, but much later, and throughout their school years, girls score higher on average than boys do in both reading and writing. Conversely, the ratio of boys who score over 700 out of 800 on the math section of their SAT is 13 to 1. Certainly, each culture may have their unique quirks and eccentricities for how males and females behave, but the fundamentals are obviously biological. PET
I
can
hope you have a fantastic day.
But the fundamentals are obviously biological, chat. Lily loves that. Thanks to poonages.
MRI scans have allowed us to view how the male and female brains
This is sped up.
activate in certain areas when solving problems and responding to stimuli. Males have 2.5
But I
times
mean, like, here's normal speed. It'll feel slow because we've been watching normal. Let's see what normal speed is.
the brain space devoted to sex drive and larger areas devoted to aggression and action.
Oh my God, that's so boring. I can't possibly fucking go to normal.
The corpus callosum, which links the left side
The
of the brain to the right side,
corpus
is separate unit, meaning
callosum,
it federates
chat.
messages from one part
Yeah,
to the other,
just sped
which is
up.
shown to
Or
grant
just
advantage in
started.
things like verbal fluency. As much as progressives want to pretend that there are no differences between men and women, there's simply no respectable argument for that anymore. Science is settled, if you will. A number of medical studies have even shown that female-to-male organ transplants are more likely to fail than male-to-male organ transplants, even when controlling for body size. The bottom line, as articulated by Dr. Margaret McCarthy, is that sex is a biological variable that profoundly influences the physiology of every organ in the body. And of course, the brain is an organ. Sure, there's variance. Sure, women with higher levels of testosterone are more likely to be unfaithful spouses. They're more likely to have stronger handshakes. They're more or less likely to smile in photographs. There's always interesting little quirks. But any neurologist would be able to correctly identify those brains as females because the differences are that significant. Therefore, if my opponent is to win the debate, he will have to prove that gender roles in themselves do not exist at all beyond arbitrary and perhaps oppressive social constructs and explain why that's been the case for virtually all of history. Gender roles, of course, only being relevant to the discussion because of failed predictions about, well...
So he's appealing to history? Historically, we've been doing this, so it must be right. Classic conservative brain. We must be doing this, which is why when you get a fever, we let out some of your blood to lower your temperature, chat. That's why it still happens. We'll just bleed you a little bit when you get a fever, and everything will come on down, you know?
If we stop oppressing them, it'll be equal. And then, well, if we stop discriminating against them, it'll be equal. And now finally the blame is on these internalized attitudes about gender and socially constructed things.
Well, that's what you get for being uncobbed. You let that cob slip, you fumble the cob, chat. This is what happens. You get those mads.
That can't be proven. Then that'll finally be equal. Why is it that the profile, though, of the most depressed person in America is also the profile of she who we're told is the greatest beneficiary of these programs, the single, middle-aged, childless working woman? Why do primates display early sex differences in behavior? Is this also socially constructed? Young male monkeys have been found to prefer dump trucks and other vehicles as opposed to plush dolls, whereas the young female monkeys prefer the plush dolls. Are they behaving differently because we expect them to? If so, why doesn't this translate to our expectations of them throwing feces at each other? With the academic censorship and cultural programming, we would expect the male-female gaps to close if it were really about environment. But they haven't. So the question is, should America return to traditional gender roles? It's not
Give one to Ivana. Let's go.
simple as door A versus door B. It's actually about rather consciously choosing.
How long is his opening statement? Good fucking lord.
Continue to swim upstream
Did they do
from our
10
nature.
minutes?
Given that we know the answer to this is yes, the gender roles are biological, the more interesting question is, how has this messaging created a culture that is better for men and women than the one that we had prior? It's created broken homes, broken children.
Can someone put him in a locker? Just put him in a locker. I'm getting too toxic just looking at him. I can't even look at this guy without feeling toxic masculinity, chat. It just rises up out of me. I want to bully. That's what I get when my blood transfusion, I run a fever. It's not my immune system reacting to new stuff. Oh, I don't know. No clue. Do they heat the blood?
Isolation, nihilism, and despondency. What have we gained?
Tech Tank! Thanks for giving one a rub blow.
Social experiment. Why should it continue?
Where did you guys
if
go?
we had the option to return economically and socially, we would. Pew Research shows that among married mothers, 76% of them say that their ideal work situation would be either no work or just part-time work. Include into that single mothers.
Gifting subs and not giving yourself one.
Remains at 67%. Moreover, Pew Research, when researching the trade-offs between work and family time, found that married mothers who had, quote, made sacrifices for their family were the happiest. We've also learned that homemakers are more likely to report being very satisfied with the work they do in comparison to those who pursue paid employment. When women have the
under threat of their policeman husbands.
Option, this is what they want. If Hunter is correct, you would expect to see happier men and happier women, but you see the opposite. You see widespread despair, mental illness, and suicide. Rejecting gender roles is a form of narcissism. It says, I am better than my biology. I'm living for me. Not coincidentally, research published in 2009 by psychologist Jen Twenge used data collected from some 16,000 college students and found a sharp rise in scores on a narcissism index personality test, of course, disproportionately affecting young women since the 1950s. But anytime egalitarianism is brought up, it's framed as both possible and desirable. There's literally no metric to suggest that these things have been good for us other than the fact that they've happened. Why is this good? Because we have it now. Why is it good to have equality? Because it's equal. Who cares? If history has been so terrible and patriarchal, then how did we build this society? And why have the last few decades of experimenting with my opponent's ideas about gender been...
What do you mean, how do we build a society? We've had like 4 generations of successful living here, and only for a small subset of people of the culture. Like, what? This guy want to go back to fucking Roanoke and live as a fucking... colonist? I would love if John Doyle starved to death and then was forced to be cannibalized by his fellow settlers on the eastern seaboard of America in the fucking 1600s or whatever that was. What was Roanoke? Roanoke? Or that what was that one? Blue Ridge Mountains. Anyway.
Men and women. Are we really supposed to believe that without these oppressive gender roles we would have something like Wakanda? And if so, why have we declined so rapidly since the onset of these attitudes a few decades ago? When does the utopia kick in? A social construction is not by definition at odds with nature. It emerges from our nature and serves human needs. Boys must be guided into manhood, much differently than girls, who must be guided into womanhood. This is how we build society. The most happy people in America are married men and married women. Statistically, couples are much healthier.
Well, that was what they wrote on the thing, right?
Less prone to suicide, less prone to abuse drugs and alcohol, less likely to be employed, more likely to have a broad network of friends and relatives, all more than single and divorced people. This is a fact. Attacking the institution of marriage through gender roles is terrorism, and we will not stand for it.
Hunter?
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much to Uncensored America for sponsoring this event. No censorship here. One complaint, though, you guys did mess up with bringing me my soy milk. But it's okay. I can forgive you. But yeah. So today.
The soy jokes. The soy.
The question is, should America return to traditional gender roles? Yeah. Now, gender roles are a collection of behaviors that we expect men and women to adhere to in order to be the ideal man or woman. Although gender roles have changed and adapted throughout history, some roles have outlived others. This includes women being polite, accommodating...
Lily, thanks for the 100 biddies. Roanoke was the colony where the settlers went and joined the Native Americans because they ran out of supplies. John Doyle would starve because he's a fucking racist. It's like how people think it's mystery that it happened to them because they're also racist. Yeah, they went and joined, right? Well, I was looking it up. Croatoan apparently ethnologists and anthropologists believe that it's a word that may have been a combination of two Algonquin words, meaning talk town or council town. So it maybe was like a thing where that implies to me like, hey, come talk to us. We're cool. We're just chill. Not sure though. Doping on soy milk. Doping on it?
Nurturing.
When you say doping like that, it makes me think of like athletes putting like testosterone in their soy milk so they can run
and men
fast.
being aggressive, stoic, and dominant. These are considered more traditional gender roles. And just to be clear, gender roles
It's like an old YouTube video all of a sudden. Okay.
by themselves are not always bad, but the enforcement of them almost always is. Obviously, gender roles aren't enforced by law, but they are enforced socially. This includes stigma around men who
Got
show
it.
their emotions
Argonian bum, 27 months. Let's go.
and stay at home with the kids, and shaming women who enter the workforce or prioritize career instead of starting a family. Traditionalists will often claim that women are naturally more nurturing and men are naturally protective providers. This is
I am so hoping that I don't have to say shit while Hunter's talking.
almost always followed by fantasizing about 1950s America, the supposed golden era where the nuclear family was promoted, traditional gender roles were heavily encouraged, and women knew their place. It's true that the 1950s saw the highest rate of happiness among Americans yet. That is true. However, this wasn't due to traditional gender roles. In fact, something the traditionalists don't talk about very often is that although the nuclear family was heavily advertised, the 1950s actually saw traditional gender roles being challenged in many ways, particularly for women. After World War II, women made up a third of the workforce, entering
Voting.
the workforce at unprecedented rates during the war. Although traditional values were still heavily encouraged and women had fewer rights compared to men, many women challenged these roles and stayed content working jobs that were usually perceived as more masculine. Many traditionalists will also point to the 50s and 60s as an example of a time when marriage lasted and divorce was hardly an option. Again, it's true that the 50s saw an all-time high when it came to marriage rates, but you have to ask yourself at what cost? Because this time also included less autonomy for women, divorce was rare, but spousal abuse was common, with domestic abuse not even being considered a legal matter, but a family issue. That's right, domestic abuse was not a legal matter, law enforcement didn't even get involved most of the time, and domestic abuse wasn't formally criminalized nationally until 1994. Now, thankfully, we've come a long way, and gender roles have certainly become looser, but these traditional gender roles are still encouraged in many ways, particularly when it comes to the modern nuclear family. Women are still generally seen as the caretakers, and men are usually expected to be the breadwinner. This arrangement works well for millions of couples in America. I have no problem with a stay-at-home mom and a working father. The problem arises, again, when these roles are enforced by shaming those who deviate from these gender expectations. The father absolutely should provide for his family, but what is provision? Provision is not limited to financial provision. If a father is better equipped to stay at home with the kids and the mother is better suited to be the breadwinner, why is this a problem? They should both be providing. Even if this kind of arrangement works better for some family units, stay-at-home dads still face shaming and stigma surrounding their masculinity. A 2013 Pew Research Center survey found that while 51% of Americans think
making it a men's rights thing in the uncensored America place is a smart play.
child is better off with a mother at home than in the workplace, only 8% say the child would be better off with a stay-at-home father. Furthermore, even if women are naturally better caretakers, the attempt at enforcing this role only results in negative outcomes. Research has actually shown that female caregivers experience greater role strain, which means that they face more pressure to conform to caregiving positions. An analysis by Bowling Green State University found that female caregivers generally report having more negative experiences than male caregivers. And according to a 2012 Gallup poll of more than 60,000 stay-at-home moms, they found these women were more likely to report anger, sadness, and depression compared to their employed counterparts.
Let's go!
Now, of course, if being a stay-at-home mom is what the woman wants, I would expect her to be happy in that role. But enforcing it via
Best liberal. Wow. What a high bar, Mr. Feeney. What a high bar. All right. Let's just can we knock the rest of the shit off of Hunter every once in a while? You know how when you step in poop and you scrape it on the grass? Can we like take the hose to it and get the rest of it off? Because he's not far from being fine, but then he has dum-dum takes sometimes. Why? Look, if you gas up Hunter too much, you force me to counterbalance that. Okay? So don't do that. He's doing a good job right now. Let me enjoy it while it lasts. Don't pretend that Hunter, that any liberal is satisfactory to me, okay? I am not satisfied by any liberal. He's way too debate-brain. Yeah, look. Hunter Avallone's biggest problem has always been and will always be, until he defeats it, that he worries about people like... How do I want to say this? I don't think it's insecurity, because insecurity is when you lampshade, because I don't think he's an insecure guy. I think Hunter knows that he's kind of a dork, but he really wants to be not perceived as such. And it's like, don't worry about that. Like he constantly tries to fucking big dog people and alpha them and gorilla beat his chest and shit. And it's just like, you're a twerp. Please don't fucking try to do that. You do not have the energy of a man that should be this aggressive. Not to mention, the aggression is like in place of what could be his, like, just be productive. I don't know. Sometimes, man, the vibe is just fucking weird for him sometimes. He'll drop an R slur at some point. Oh, I'm sure he'll do something. He'll always do something. I always thought that was the joke. No, he's not making a joke. He's always been like this. Hunter has some hang-ups, man. I hope look, this is a good path though. So I don't want to like disparage the guy too much, but when you guys say too many good things, you force me.
Expectations and stigma pushes
This is
people
good so
into boxes
far.
that they might
Good
not
so
fit
far.
in.
Don't make me-
Even more so,
don't
the
make
attempt
me
to
be
enforce
like
traditional
a dick
gender
for
roles
no reason.
actually harms a huge goal of traditionalists, which is strong and healthy family units. In 2013, the University of Chicago published a paper that looked at 4,000 married couples in America, and it found that once a woman started to earn more than her husband, divorce rates increased. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, doesn't this prove then that men should be the primary earners? No, actually. It proves that these rigid gender roles largely need to be done away with. The reason a female breadwinner increases the likelihood of divorce is largely because men feel emasculated for not living up to these arbitrary expectations placed on men. The study also found that even when the woman earns more, she still does more housework as well. The authors of the study said
That's
that
a good character arc, though. Look. Okay. This is some Swaggy P shit. Swaggy P? You guys know Swaggy P? You've seen it. I know you've seen it. Some Swaggy P shit. This is you right now.
The black would love
Wait,
it.
not that. I can't show that. Some Swaggy P. I'll do the Swaggy P gif. Not that one. That one's awesome. Right here. That's you. Come on, dude. It's in the middle of the arc. You don't know. You don't know. Do not throw those hands up yet. It could rim out, dude. Don't put your faith in this. You're not right until you're right, goddammit. I agree, though. It looks like a good shot so far. I know you've seen it. Sports. It's not the sports. You've seen the GIF where he shoots the shot and he misses, bro. You've seen that on Twitter and on social media. Shoot or shoot, okay?
a threatening wife will take on a greater share of housework, so to
I've literally shared it, Altered Rin. You were just forgot.
comfort the husband's unease with the situation. If the woman is
I've
successful
literally
and is able
tweeted
to
this
learn,
multiple
able to
times, and I
earn
know you're on Twitter. Bumble Host, thanks to you want to pack Power Fan.
more, this shouldn't cause unease. The end goal should be a happy, healthy, stable family unit. Even more so, according to a study published in Sage Journals, using data for married and cohabitating heterosexual couples in 29 countries from 2004 to 2014, their results provide robust evidence that male breadwinner norms are a key driver of the association between men's unemployment and risk of separation. An increase of 1 standard deviation in male breadwinner norms increases the odds of separation with men's unemployment by 32%. Unfortunately, when we shame men for not being the breadwinner, it destabilizes marriages and hurts the end goal of traditionalism. Because men feel pressure that they must be the breadwinner in order to be the ideal man, job loss can lead to lower confidence and a higher likelihood that the marriage will end. Attempting to enforce gender roles hurts marriages in other ways as well. Studies have already suggested that strict adherence to these rigid traditional gender roles, you're messing me up, Sean. Studies have already suggested that strict adherence to these rigid traditional gender roles can increase the likelihood that the man will act out in violence against his partner. But that's not all. A 2014 study assessed the effect of masculine discrepancy stress, which is a form of distress arising from perceived failure to conform.
I don't think in the debate they would think this is a good thing. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think John Doyle deep down goes, sometimes you gotta hit your partner. You know what I mean? I think he thinks that like partner to partner violence is justified, specifically. Well, I guess he only recognizes heterosexual cis relationships, so man to woman. You know what I mean? He thinks that husbands should be able to hit their wives every once in a while, for sure.
Form to socially prescribed masculine gender
no
role
way.
norms on intimate partner violence. Results
Whether he would
indicated that
admit
masculine
to that or
discrepancy
not, I
stress
don't know. He's a little
significantly
edgy. He
predicted
probably
men's
would.
historical perpetuation of
I bet I could get John Doyle to say sometimes it's okay to hit your wife.
intimate partner violence. Abuse of any kind is one of the leading causes of divorce. The more you shame men for failing to live up to your preferred gender roles, the more likely it is that that man will harm his marriage and harm his partner and destroy his marriage. And none of that is very traditional. Gendered expectations that men should be stoic, viewing emotions as a sign of weakness, is incredibly detrimental to men's own mental well-being. There have been many times throughout history when crying was specifically perceived as masculine, but that's far from the case nowadays. Unfortunately, this expectation leads to repressive coping styles and an increased likelihood of suicide. Now, I'm not sure how you could live a traditional life or raise a traditional family if you're dead. Today in the U.S., men are significantly more likely to die by suicide than women. Perhaps by acknowledging how
Making
enforcing
the
these roles
whole
on men
thing
negatively
about
affects
men's
them,
rights.
society can help to alleviate this devastating reality.
This
If
is
gender roles
okay.
work
So
in your
this is the problem. Not the whole thing, but a lot of it is obviously like pretty clearly like we're going like a men's rights arc, so to force John Doyle to, you know, not defend points hard enough so that Hunter can win part of the crowd, because obviously some men MRAs are gonna be there. Valid, but this is why debate bros get a bad rap. Because it's pretty obvious that gender roles harm one subset of the community more. And all these are valid points, but you know, it's like a 80-20 thing.
Own relationship, that's cool. But
It's a good strategy for a debate, but
and force these roles on others to appease your own desire for a traditional aesthetic. Marriage has been proven to lead to higher rates of happiness and a longer lifespan. If you value marriage, recognize how these gender roles can impact the family unit, and it's crucial for a happier future. In fact, according to research published by Brigham Young University, couples with an equal partnership report more stability in their marriage, less conflict, less dependency, and less
not in mine, new
resentment.
monster.
The expectation that men should be the breadwinner and women is naturally better off with the children can also have negative effects even on the children. How
Subscribe
often have we heard people
immediately,
complain
or
about how-
Sarah will be the breadwinner, chat. That's not true. She will not be the breadwinner. Subscribe immediately so I can be the breadwinner.
Men rarely receive custody of the children. Maybe this is because we consistently reinforce this idea that women are just always naturally the better caretakers. Again, the idea that you should be strong, caring, and provide for your family are good values to have, but they don't apply to men or women. These values should be universal, divorced from gender entirely, and decided upon based on whomever is better equipped for that role within the marriage. So to summarize, enforcing gender roles...
It's literally identity politics, for the record. Like if you enforce gender roles, you are just doing gender or identity politics. You're making assumptions based on their identity. I mean, I don't know how it isn't.
I hope you have a fantastic day.
She's the bread winner. Yeah, true. Peach Dry, thanks for the prime. 10 months of them.
Can have devastating effects on marriages. It can contribute to higher rates of violence against women. It forces people to conform at the expense of their own well-being. It ignores the potentially caring fathers who deserve custody over their children, and it contributes to higher rates of suicide.
Time's up.
None of that is traditional.
All right, we're going to move on to our first segment. We're going to have our first segment where we'll be rotating from John Hunter. Each will have 5 minutes, and then we'll do another round. Each have 5 minutes before we do the crossfire. So, John, you have 5 minutes.
Well, the first thing I'd like to address is sort of the overarching theme of his opening statement there, which is this idea that gender roles may exist in whatever capacity, they evolve over time, but they definitely shouldn't be enforced. I agree with this. No one's saying that gender roles should be enforced, but what's interesting is that while they may evolve over time, certain men in certain societies might dress a certain way, other men might cry before a knighting ceremony or something like that. Ultimately, the biological roots of how men and women behave are one-to-one all throughout history and all throughout different societies. Moreover, who is enforcing them? Where is like the gender roles?
John always looks like he's about to cry. I hope so.
Stotzi going door to door and being like, are you barefoot, naked, pregnant in the kitchen or whatever? This is just simply not happening. In fact, it's actually being enforced in the opposite direction through, frankly, institutional soft power. I mean, look at where you see in the media. The messaging is always anti-traditional. It's always why women who, well, frankly, white women. Why white women need to stop having kids. Why white people need to stop having kids right now. It is all anti-natalist propaganda.
What? Have as many kids as you want, dude. The argument from lefties is not that, like, you shouldn't have kids. It's that capitalism and the system that we live under in America and other Western nations don't make having kids a crazy viable option for a lot of people. Like, what? You can be personally anti-natalist. Like, no one's saying this shit. Have as many kids as you want. I just would hope that you are a quality caretaker. And obviously, it's obvious John would not be.
He did also make an interesting point there that I think is true.
He didn't accidentally do a great replacement.
Which is that It is more
He
difficult now to
purposely
get
did
married.
it.
This isn't necessarily because tradition in itself has failed, but because of things like economic structures,
You might say
offshore
great
manufacturing base. It is true that what we had in the 1950s is not what we have now, and that is a problem. So this is sort of an abstract discussion in that regard. Another thing that he mentioned there was less autonomy for women. I would be curious to see how that's defined. What does that even mean? Like, yeah, if you are legally enshrined via some document that you are married to this man, sure, there's going to be a little bit of limitations on that behavior, but I would be curious to see why that's inherently bad. Also, domestic abuse. Careful, who defines that? I mean, there is often
What did I fucking tell you, dude?
a lot of embellishing that goes on in these cases. Obviously, no one here is for domestic abuse, but I would be curious to see what that was actually looking like
Really?
back then, because you can look at it from what was legally allowed and what was
Really?
legally not allowed. But in terms of the actual instances of it occurring, you often hear this leftist trope of like, oh, women in the 50s were getting abused, and it's like, oh, okay, hey, grandma, is that true? Oh, no, sweetie, that's not. It's just like all this manufactured historical revisionism. Also,
You ever talk to an old person about what constitutes abuse? You ever try to tell your parent that they abused you for, whatever abuse they did to you? And have you tried to get any sort of conversation out of that? It's a non-starter. They don't have the language for it. They don't understand that the word abuse doesn't necessarily mean that you were a fucking criminal. Like, they don't understand the conversation at all. Of course, grandma's going to be like, I wasn't abused. Oh, just sometimes your grandpappy would work 14-hour shifts in the mine and then come home and self-medicate with alcohol, which was the only way that he could curb both the daily stress of working in the environment of non-safety that is our modern mining system, 50s mining system, and also for the fact that I didn't heat up his meatloaf, and that makes him pretty mad. And so, I was just asking for it because, that's how all the old-timey stories go. It's always like this. This guy's trash, dude. My dad doesn't recognize he was emotionally abused by his parents. Of course not. And they don't, and they won't recognize that they passed down that abuse. The boomers and the greatest generation, they're all fucked. They're all fucked. Ask them basic questions about abuse and what constitutes it. Your mind will be blown.
the decline in marriage to the 50s, it is true that the 50s were kind of the peak, but the decline began much further than that, right?
Ari says, I know I'm past the hype train, but may I beg for a mod corn?
Things like no-fault divorce, normalization of the
I
sexual
hope
revolution.
you
Ponages! Thanks for going to
That's why
Athena.
marriage has declined, and it is good, and it does make people happier. And actually, you can look at studies that have surveyed 1,500 couples, or another one that's surveyed 40,000 people, and they find that couples in more traditional marriages, read less egalitarian marriages, are actually happier and stay together longer.
stabbed him with a
In terms of
spoon?
women
Nice.
earning more leading to divorce, well, if you look at who's initiating the divorce, it's like 80% women. So I don't think it's exactly the man just being emasculated. I think it's more of what maybe the more incel types in the crowd would recognize as hypergamy. Women
80% of women are the ones asking for divorce, and he sees that as a fault in women. I'm fucking shocked. Requesting to no longer be legally bound to your partner for what reasons, John? Hypergamy?
regardless of their income, want men who earn more than they do. All across the world, all throughout time, they are attracted to resource and status. I mean,
do you know why women are attracted to status
I
and
hope you
resource in
have
our
a
culture, our
fantastic
Western
day.
culture? Tech, thanks for going to Ari. Because you forced women for generations until recently, literally until like our parents were born, like in the 50s, like 40s and stuff, when they finally let women go work in the factory and shit for the World War IIs. Oh, not screen sharing? That's fine, whatever. Do you want to look at this fucking guy? I was ranting.
I hope you
Umadine!
have a
Thanks for
fantastic
Prime. That rhymed. So did that. Women were a commodity themselves for a long, long time. There's a reason that you paid the father for your wife. There's a reason why rings were given to women, because they weren't allowed to own property, but in the case of their death of their husband or abuse from their husband, and they were forced to be gone out of that situation, she would have some form of wealth on her at all times. It was like part of it. Usually with, like made of gold or silver or some other thing that could be traded.
This is just the way that these things go. In terms of why do they still do housework, it's not because
dowries,
they're trying to coddle their stupid husband. It's if you look at the way that men and women solve problems, men solve problems by looking at it and reducing it to its most componental forms and kind of solving it from there. Women tend to be much more meticulous. For those of us married, you might recall a situation where you were assigned to do a chore and you did it because you're not like this character of like, no, I'm the man. You did it, and your wife comes by and she's like, no, let me do it. You didn't do it right. That's just the way that these things go. So yeah, they're still doing the housework, but I don't think it's because they're like trying to help out their like poor husband. I'd be curious to see the sort of psychoanalysis on this too. Is Hunter a stay-at-home dad? Is he insecure in that role? Who knows? But maybe you just feel like you failed as a man. Well, maybe that is what it is. You failed as a man. There's something going on within you that feels like you failed to provide. Maybe that's not socially constructed. Maybe that's just a reality. Like, it's not like this situation where, oh, I feel like I should be LARPing the 1950s, but I can't afford a Bel Air. What? I'm just distraught. Maybe it's like the most fundamental components of who you are as a man is actually being challenged by your inability to provide. I think that's very important to consider. Also, why is it bad? Why is it bad that, men might be earning more, women might be earning less? I fail to see how that's bad. And of course, he did neglect to address.
What do you mean? In the opening
It has to
statement,
do?
there were examples of like illustrations of why this is bad. My paternal grandpa was so in love with my grandma that when you said her name after the Alzheimer's was so bad he didn't know his own name, he would blush and get all shy and say, "That's my wife. It was cute and sad as fuck. My standards for marriage are high as fuck." That's how I'm gonna be. I'm down bad, chat. Well, not down bad. I love my wife.
All the biological components that I was certain to mention in my introduction, very important stuff. He also brought up the suicide rates, male suicide, because of these harmful gender stereotypes. When they were at their peak, in the 1950s, let's say, what are you, some kind of fairy? Kids weren't killing themselves at the rate they are now. Men weren't killing themselves at the rate they are now. So when gender roles were the...
In the 50s? They were dead from war. Also, that's not true. I guarantee suicide rates were pretty high back then. Guarantee it. Can't imagine the reporting on 1950s suicides were great, though.
The most strict. The suicide rates and the depression rates in both genders were not what they are now. So I fail to see how that computes. Equal partnership is another thing he brought up. I would be curious to see how they define that. A lot of married couples I know who are more traditional consider themselves equal in the sense that the man provides, the woman takes care of the other things. And with the divorce court thing, I think it's also fair to say they tend to frame men as abusers more than they frame women as like nurturers. You're not going to have like some liberal judge who's like, oh, the women are just so good at nurturing. It's going to be like, men are evil. So, yes.
Some of this is from John, your opening here. So you seem to be really set on this biological difference here. And I don't know if maybe some other blue-haired lefties have like a weirder position, but obviously biology is real. Yes, of course. And you even talk about how men and women have brain differences. And even some of that is true. However, I think you left out something very important, which is that brains are malleable. They are like plastic. You can talk to scientists about this. And so social norms, essentially, have the potential to change how your brain operates. So that could also play a role in why you see differences in male and female brains. But again, biology is real. I'm not denying that. Again, the problem comes when you are trying to enforce these gender roles on other people. And I don't know why you would say you're not trying to enforce them when you are literally advocating to bring America back to traditional gender roles. I don't know how you do that unless you're planning on enforcing it to a degree. And then you even go further and say, well, who's enforcing them? And then you proceed to try and get a diss at me for possibly being a stay-at-home dad. John, you're the one doing it, buddy. You're the one going door to door, making sure that the women are pregnant and naked in the kitchen. And you talk about no-fault divorce. That's another one I hear a lot about. I think people fail to understand that no-fault divorce largely means that you don't need to prove to a divorce court why you are getting
divorce court. Uh-oh. Pwned in the debate.
Divorce, which, let's be real, how does somebody prove that they're being emotionally abused? How does somebody
We're not actually married yet. It's okay, Mr. Feeney. I'm not actually a loser for loving my wife. We're not actually married yet.
prove that? That cannot always be proven in a court. So no-fault divorce, it goes both ways. I don't know really what relevance that has. You bring up the study about how women seem to be happier, or they report happier marriages when they have more traditional gender roles. Now, the study you're talking about actually classified that as benevolent sexism. And what that means is that the man tend to treat the women as he would adore her, and he would be more protective of her. Again, nothing really wrong with that. I don't even know why they would call it benevolent sexism, to be honest. However,
I do. Here we go, Hunter. Something I could teach you. Now, a list of many things. Benevolent sexism is a situation that we've talked about before on this stream. Benevolent sexism, I guess, is, I didn't know that was the official term, but we've talked about it before. Essentially, you ever see those feminist dudes? Oh my God, feminazi dudes. Feminist dudes who will see a woman or a minority, or they're almost always liberals. Almost always liberals. And they do this performative prostration based on identity alone. They'll be like, a woman said it, well, must be true, women are right. This is why you see a lot of feminist down bad dudes in the TERF movement. Same shit. Well, a woman was saying. People do this with it's not just benevolent misogyny either. Like the people do this with trans people, gay people, black people. Like it happens all the time. So it's the same energy that would make you be a white person and go put chains on your neck and then like openly weep and ask black people for your forgiveness. Like that's just gross. Like invoking the fucking subjugation of generations of stolen peoples to make you feel a little bit better about some weird white guilt shit you got going on, dog. Like, how would you just I'd rather you just gave a black person $5. I don't know. Random black guy on the street. Hey man, could you use $5? Although that would then it would be a case where they start profiling people. No, don't let the libs around this concept in general. Never mind. Let's back out. Let's stop letting the libs do stuff. Never mind.
However, if you look at the actual study, you'll see the reason that they were happier, the reason men and women were happier, at least, were different. Women specifically were happier because since the man was giving her more adoration. And
white guy singing "Wade in the Water." No. No.
Acting more protective, she actually perceived the marriage as being more egalitarian, and that was the reason why she was happier. You can read the study. I would dare any of you to do that. Now, let's see. What else do we have here? You talk about how things have gotten worse now. You bring up broken homes. Again, I've already explained how enforcing traditional gender roles can actually contribute to broken homes, so I don't know why you would want to keep doing that if you care about broken homes. You talk about widespread despair. That is true. People are becoming less happy. Again,
there's no way we get through this chat.
Unhappy and then just
there's no way.
To any issue you want.
I can't do it.
The reason why people are less happy nowadays is because economic differences, and more specifically, people have less friends. People are not friends with their neighbors the same way that they used to be. And as funny as that might sound, that is a large reason as to why the happiness rates are decreasing here in America. You also
I agree. Lack of communal living. What ideology can you think of that would prioritize communities?
talk about the increase of narcissism. Again, you can look and see why. It's largely because of social media use. That brings out narcissism and has even been shown to have a correlation with narcissistic behavior. So to just point to a time where people are unhappy and then attribute it to anything, I mean, that's not fair. I could say, well, a lot of people right now are unhappy, and John, you have a lot of subscribers, so clearly you're the reason why everybody's unhappy, you know? Like, that's, everybody I think can recognize that that's not a very reasonable or logical way to assess these issues. And then last but not least, you talk about gender roles being a social construct. Again, biology can exist. Gender roles, as far as the expectations that we expect from certain people, those can be, and largely are, socially constructed. There's a reason why biology, or excuse me, gender roles have changed. And Doyle, you point to a lot of similarities between history and how there were some similarities there, but I feel like you've also left out some major differences. For example, this is a pretty funny one, but small penises used to be a sign of masculinity. There's a reason why these ancient statues all depict men with Did my mic die? Okay. Depict men with these tiny little penises, and it's because at the time, having a large penis was seen as barbaric and ridiculous and the antithesis of masculinity. So I think that it's really important to dig into the nitty-gritty there, the nuance.
There you go. That's a little bit for you guys. You know? Just in case.
I didn't get to hit on everything, but I feel like I was able to address some of the main points you made there.
What about, we should get Roman statues of girl dick, personally.
John, you have 5 minutes to respond? No problem.
Hold on, I never learned how to write correctly. So he acknowledged correctly that biology is real. Neuroplasticity is also something that is real. If you're familiar with the dissertation, you know that the effects of this are real. The thing is, though, neuroplasticity, socialization, whatever you'd like to call it, you can test isolate with babies and with young children, like we did so conveniently in my introduction. And if that were the case, that neuroplasticity, you know...
Roman statues of girl dick. Are you talking about, is it Donatello's... I think it's Donatello's... What's the guy that killed the David? David and Goliath? Is that the one? That's the one. Well, we actually did a big art study thing in this. This is actually my favorite. If you didn't know, like during the Hellenistic period and stuff, or I guess the Renaissance period, also the Hellenistic period. Statues were really, really interesting. Anyways, Renaissance period. This is actually like sort of a feminine take on the David statue, which is quite unique, and it's just real cool. If you're into that sort of thing, I like it. And this is Goliath's head down here. I don't know why they're always naked anymore. I probably used to know why they were always naked. Well, part of it was the artist just trying to get the human form right. But are you talking about Hermes? That could be Herm Edwards. No, it's not. It's going to be a Herm. You talking about these? Herms are actually really interesting. Herms were like literally these things were just around Roman cities, and they would have like little dicks on them, and they would be signifiers for entrances to places. And I'm assuming often like brothels and stuff it happened more because they were like, there's like hard dicks sometimes. Sometimes they're just dicks, but they're always like this. Like you see a million of them. Like these are Herms.
It has to do.
Now you know some stuff. Herms were Greek mile markers, basically. Did people rub them when they went by? Oh yeah, for sure. There's no way they didn't. Statuette of standing hermaphrodite. Is that how you call it? Hermaphrodite? Neat. Girl dick. Let's go. Anyway.
Brain's going to be molded. You'd expect to see like maybe 50-50, 40-60 in terms of like where the babies are landing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hellenistic relationships were really interesting. It was kind of weird for you to fuck your wife if you were like a high up Roman. Isn't that weird? Like you were supposed to be together, and she would like run your business kind of, and you were supposed to like go do man stuff like politics and shit, and then you were also supposed to have concubines and like others, and so was she. She was supposed to have people she fucked, and then you I guess your duties were to create children, I suppose, but like it was weird to like have a regular sexual relationship with your wife, like a partner, like we do it. Isn't that odd? Anyway, not that it didn't happen, of course. People definitely still loved each other, but
on the gender role spectrum, it's 1-to-1. It's 100% of the time. Also, in terms of how enforcing it, are we really supposed to believe that Hunter Avallone gives a damn what I think about anything? That me making a little quip about a stay-at-home dad is somehow making stay-at-home dads insecure in the role? Absolutely not. But in terms of how it's being enforced, it's not so much enforcing it, it's simply removing the barriers. It is simply removing the propaganda that is telling young men and young women that the best thing they can do is pursue a career and not get married, and hookup culture and women wanting children is like outdated and cringe, and it's actually empowering to be a sentient fleshlight. That type of influence does get in people's brains. And so you can actually poll young people, and what
chat, do any of you feel like it's empowering to be a sentient fleshlight? I'm only asking because I'm interested. It's only because I'm deeply interested in your answers.
you'll find is that many of them still wanting to get married and wanting to have kids, believing that male and females are completely equal in the sense that they are the same. But then they'll also say, well, of course I'm a fan, of course I believe these things. So they are much less likely to want to say things that are socially unacceptable, but they still believe in their brains that they want to pursue things that would be regarded as more traditional. Also, benevolent sexism, call it what you want. Like, yeah, that sounds like pretty good to me. I don't know. It's like, oh, well, you're saying that the males and the females in
You're good, Pseudo? Well, then obviously you must be very traditional.
the relationship were happy. Well, they were happy for different reasons because they're men and
Only
women.
sometimes.
Yes, obviously. And also, like, well, the woman actually, she's getting one up on you because she perceives it differently. She thinks it's actually equal. Who cares? Let her think what she wants. You know, like,
What
okay,
a
do your thing, that's
thinking,
fine.
feeling
It doesn't really matter. It
dildo.
doesn't have an effect on the relationship.
Sure.
Everybody's happy. Everything's fine.
A
He is
sex
correct
toy.
about the less friends, the relationships in general being in decline. It is true. This is symptomatic of industrial society, of technology, of things like that. And of course, these are problems and they have caused relationships to degrade. I am simply trying to remove the influence of the people who are purposefully trying from the top down to psyop young men and women into pursuing a life of hedonism as opposed to a life that is more meaningful through the creation of a family. In terms of suicide, depression, things like
You can be a hedonist and have a family. Did you know that? Did you know that you can enjoy your life and have good sex and also be a parent? Why do they think, okay, I don't understand the idea that once you become a parent, you have to stop fucking. Obviously, you're going to have less free time to do so. Obviously. But I don't know why they think that, like it's quite clear most marriages don't just fucking die into smithereens when you have a kid. What? Did you know that when I made that kid, I was fucking? Just saying. And having been in a relationship with a person who had kids, I can tell you
I
that
hope you will have a fantastic day.
you find a way. You find a way. Sure, it might have to be well after bedtime. Sure, you might have to lock the door and stop if one of them starts crying for no damn reason in the middle of the night. But yeah, having a fulfilling life as a parent is totally easy. However, that said, most of the barrier, John, although he wouldn't care, most of the barrier is capitalism. It's not just people's fucking society. Most people don't want kids because they find it unethical or untenable. Unethical because it's hard to want to be a parent if you can't actually give them a good life. Exmo Jimbo, thanks for the 56 months. If you can barely give yourself a life, how can you expect people to give another person a life?
It's like that. As mentioned in my intro, males and females experience depression much differently. Men are more likely to feel depressed if they feel like they have failed in their role. Females are more likely to feel depressed if they sort of are off-put by the environment. You can also see this in their suicide rates, for example. Men are more likely to successfully commit suicide. Women are more likely to successfully attempt suicide. I'm sure we can see the picture. A male is in a position, and he's like, yeah, there's no way out of this. Shotgun to the head. A woman might be having an emotional episode, and just kind of does something, and goes to the hospital, everything's fine. I'm sorry, but this is just the case. So in terms of like what we expect from our partners being socially constructed, it's the same throughout cultures. Every single culture wanted the status, wanted the youth, wanted the beautiful young woman. That is the same. In terms of the little differences, this guy wanted it, this might say, okay, find me a big difference. Find me a culture that was like, actually, women are running the show. Actually, women are exclusively the providers, exclusively not the nurturers. There's literally not one society that does this. Also, the small penis thing, look, we've all been in high school, we've all doodled or whatever. Men just, that's what we do. We plant the flag. And I think that it's probably more likely that the artists who were sculpting those sculptures knew that if they made a more accurate depiction of the male appendage, that would be all that people looked at. So I think it's actually historic.
We just looked at a bunch of dicks. It's not, he has no basis for that. He's just like, well, I guess maybe they just were like the full extent of the male appendage. Everyone would just gawk at the dick all the time.
Historically accurate to say
there were dicks
that
everywhere.
The reason they did that was to remove the distraction from the appendage and focus more on the beauty of the rest of the statue.
No, they were just, no. What the fuck? That isn't the thesis of any. This needs to take many classes. I guess art history is one of them.
And also, I would urge you, my new friend, I don't think that arguing that having a small penis is actually very masculine is going to give you the look that you would like it to.
You have 5 minutes, Hunter.
Is this working? Okay. First of all, I was arguing the small penis thing on your behalf, actually, so, But no, all kidding aside, you're just wrong about the small penis thing, okay? We should focus on that a little bit more. But seriously, first of all, I'm not arguing that having a small penis nowadays is masculine. I'm arguing
fixated on it.
Come on, we're all adults here, guys. Let's go. I'm arguing that at one point that was considered masculine, and no, it wasn't just because they were worried that people wouldn't pay attention to the other sculpture. You can read about this from historians. Ancient Greece specifically sculpted men with small penises because that was considered the highest degree of what they would consider then male beauty. You ask for an example of when women ran the show. Again, I think that you're a little confused here. Biology is real. For a long, long time, men have ran the show, and that is largely because they have testosterone. They are stronger, yes. When we were back in the cavemen days.
This actually has way more to do with pregnancy than us being strong, for the record. Because, imagine early humanity, like there's not prophylactics, there's just chance, right? Like, especially because, do they know that cum makes pregnancy happen? I don't even know. I guess you'd intuit that over time, right?
Or the days in which you needed to be out doing physical labor consistently, then yes, men were obviously going to do better there. They have testosterone. Again, I am not denying that there are biological differences between males and females. What I'm saying is that just because at one point men were the providers due to testosterone does not mean that nowadays, since testosterone is not nearly as important for providing, considering a lot of labor jobs have significantly decreased, that shouldn't be an expectation that we force on men or stigmatize them if they just don't adhere to that. You also bring up the baby boys. Baby boys are more emotionally reactive than baby girls. I don't know if you're aware of that, John, but that is a fact of the matter, that baby boys react to more emotion, they express more emotion, but it's once they get older that starts to decrease. And they've done studies with communication styles of mothers, and they found
happened to me. That literally happened to me. I don't know why. I've talked about this before. I was a very emotional child, no understanding why. And over time, it became less so.
Mother would be very receptive and cool and chill when the daughter was being very emotionally expressive. But
I still have emotions or whatever, but it's not like things would make me cry very easily. But like frustrations, like negative stimulus would make me cry. Now I don't cry a lot, but I'm more prone to cry at positive stimulus like love or whatever. You know what I mean? Like genuine good emotion is definitely more likely to make me cry nowadays than it ever was when I was a kid. But bad stuff doesn't really make me cry anymore. You cry a lot? Well, some people are criers. I'm just saying, cry as much as you need to, Chad. It's good for you, but not more than you need to. That's bad for you. That's sadness. But get a good cry out when you're watching a movie, or let yourself cry when you're happy and shit. Like, it's good for you.
So much with the boys. And it's not surprising that by the time they were 6 years old, boys had less emotional intelligence. A lot of that is, again, because of socialization. You ask why
7
I
years.
care.
You remember the day you cried last? All right, chat. Some of you need to let that go. It's not cringe to cry. It's cringe to keep yourself from crying, and that's a fact.
Your opinion is, you say, do I honestly think that anybody is going to, or why I would care about what you say, but then you go on to say that hookup culture gets in people's brains. If hookup culture and these other ideals can subconsciously get in people's minds, I don't know why your ideas couldn't, unless you're really willing to bite that bullet. I guess you're really just that insignificant if you want to go that way. But again, a lot of these issues can be attributed to expectation. It's not that there are no differences between males and females. It's that expecting males and females to act a certain way solely because they might be biologically predisposed to this behavior does more harm than good. It destroys families. It negatively impacts children. It negatively impacts men. Let's see. Let me go over one more here. Even further, when you talk about how we should kind of go the direction of our biology, we're not a slave to biology. Not at all. Part of the reason that humans have become so advanced is because we recognize biological urges and desires that are not always right. That's how humans got to where they are today. Even more so, again, if a woman wants to be a caregiver or wants to be more nurturing with the family, that is, by all means, A-okay with me. But when you force it, why is it that women report more negative feelings when they are in these roles? Why is it that women report more depression when they are stay-at-home moms? This doesn't mean being a stay-at-home mom is bad. It doesn't mean it's bad for women to be nurturing. It means that it's more likely to result in negative outcomes when you try and enforce it on people. So I say, let's be real Americans and just let people live their lives freely so long as it's not hurting other people. Cope. John.
Okay, you guys will have a 15-minute crossfire. You can go at it however you want. Just 15 minutes free for all.
Would you mind?
Are you a little bit concerned that a lot of the evidence suggests that when you try to enforce these ideals, it results in negative outcomes? Do you feel like you are worsening the outcomes for a lot of people for the sake of an
This shot is terrible.
aesthetic of traditionalism?
No, it's not about, look, I understand my intro is actually sort of self-referential in this regard, like the 1950s thing. That's sort of a parody insofar as a lot of more progressive types would tend to associate my beliefs with like this, fetishizing of the 1950s. That's not really my belief, so it is sort of a parody.
Wait, your opening wasn't your belief?
I'm not
Are
actually
you walking back on your opening, or?
I'm not actually thinking that we're going to go back to the 1950s or something like that. I simply want stable marriages and stable families.
So do
if you
I.
don't mind, I have a couple things I wanted to address here, and then maybe we can get a back and forth going.
Well, hold on, we're still in the back and forth right now.
Okay.
So no, I'm not going to go off that. If you care about stable...
John trying to get away from conversation again. Smart. Look at that. That is the face of a man right there who's just like, fuck.
marriages and stable families, why then are you advocating for the enforcement of these roles, which can be detrimental to stable families?
And again, who is doing the enforcing? I mean, your side controls virtually all of the messaging in this country. Every institution is promoting your message. I am the dissenting voice, which is why it's not actually a fair opinion to say, well, hookup culture might get in people's brains and compel them to make poor decisions, but John Doyle's over here speaking to an audience of a couple hundred people, and he...
What do you mean? And he enforces it because you... It's not that you are enforcing it, it's that you're advocating for the thing. Like, what? Hello?
He's actually going to be the one controlling
It's not
it.
just...
I don't actually have any power. What do you mean? You're advocating that you should have power to do this thing.
No, I think that it's not just you. It's like what I said in my beginning. It's that it's not enforced by law or even by institutions.
So who's doing the enforcement?
Hold on. It is socially enforced.
By who?
There are all of society in many different ways.
Society?
There are expectations. Hold on. Wait. We live in a society, okay? Joker. But... yes, there are social expectations. You heard the research I read from Pew Research. There are far more expectations that women adhere to more of these traditional roles, and when men are stay-at-home fathers, for example, that's not seen as acceptable.
I don't think that's absolutely the case. I mean, with your stay-at-home father example, I get that it's a touchy subject, so we will move on from that.
I'm not a stay-at-home dad, John, if that
Who
helps.
is enforcing all of these, gender roles? It doesn't happen. I'm young enough, you're young enough to remember having gone through the public education system, having gone through the cycle of programming to which we were exposed. There was never at any point this girls have to be these Handmaid's Tale slaves and they have to stay at home.
You're doing it. You're doing the thing where you straw man and make it seem like
It is
nobody's
exactly
saying you
the
must not
opposite.
cry or you are a little bitch. Nobody's saying this.
It is
Now,
exactly
first of all,
the
I
opposite.
recognize that you want to keep going back to the stay-at-home dad thing because it probably bothers you that I have a wife and 2 children and I'm living the trad life, you're living the mad life. I get it. But even more so,
Had to do it.
when I'm talking about these social expectations, they are subtle, John. They're not these in your face telling people that they must agree or must believe this way. They've done studies, for example, where they have asked middle schoolers draw a picture
You knew he was holding on to that. You have to.
of a scientist. Virtually everyone in that study draws a picture of a man. There's a reason why these sciences, for example, are perceived as a more masculine career. That is social conditioning, which we can change.
The reason that they draw scientists as a men is something like 90% of scientists are men or something.
Why? Why is that? Thank you for proving my point. Yes.
Because males excel in the higher levels of things like the hard sciences and things like, even as I read in the intro, the ratio is 13-1. Boys that score over 700 on the math section of their SATs compared to women, it's 13-1. That is biological. The same way that women are more likely to pursue things like early education, things like nursing, than are men. That is biological. Also,
I just can't believe you're telling me the decisions people make are just biological, as if it's not a
100%.
super complicated. Hold on, as if there's not a
100%.
super complicated and nuanced thing that goes on between, yes, some biology, but also social. We are all a result of our biology interacting with society.
the social
The decisions we
construction would
made
be
are
the
not just
idea
purely biological.
of the scientist. The scientist can't be found in nature. That is a social construction. The mechanisms in our brain making us want to go towards those things are biological. Those are innate. Also,
It's interesting to me, so what's the average age of a scientist? Do they even have that? Average age of a scientist. 41 years old. That's the average age. 43%, it's not 90%, 43% of all scientists are women, 56.9% are men. And the reason that most of them are men and the average is 41 years old is because I don't know if you have a recollection of the history of this country, but women haven't exactly always had the opportunities to go pursue these things throughout the time we've had as a country. Like, as a nation, not the greatest amount of our history has been devoted to ladies being members of the workforce.
The quip about you
Certainly not high-level members of the workforce.
being married and me not. You'll have to refer
This
me
is
to
a
which Norman
new
Rockwell
thing.
painting depicted you not.
The reason this conversation is happening is because it's relatively new.
Hooking up a woman, walking away, hooking up with another woman, and then going back to her when she was pregnant. I don't think that's very traditional. I will say that. I will tell you.
What did he say again?
Woman, walking innate. Also, the quip about you being married and mechanisms
Oh, here
in
it
our
goes.
brain making us want to go towards those things are biological. Those are innate. Also, the quip about you being married and me not. You'll have to refer me to which Norman Rockwell painting depicted you knocking up a woman, walking away, hooking up with another woman, and then going back to her when she was pregnant. I don't think that's very traditional. I will say that. I will tell
Now,
you.
it's very cute that you have like this tabloid understanding of what happened. Maybe if you've been reading up on some celebrity news, but virtually none of that was true, what you
Wrong.
just said. But even
Wrong.
more so, well, I know, it's easier for you to derail into ad homs when you're obviously being demonstrated to be completely wrong here. So men going into sciences is largely because it's expected to be a masculine and male career.
Why?
Hold on. Women have made massive contributions to the sciences, even in a time when women were not expected to, or were even actively discouraged from pursuing those things. Now it is more acceptable, but there are still subconscious biases that take place. This is why you can see, like, how common is it for a little boy to hear, hey, you should go pursue math. Hey, you should go do science. You should do these things. It's not that they're going to actively say, you're a girl, you can't do it. It's more so that that might just not be encouraged for them. And if we know that something as subtle as, another study I'll reference real quickly is, we know that something as subtle as just having a picture in the textbook that depicts a masculine or a man as a scientist is less, or it negatively affects women's ability to succeed. There was something that happened in the late 90s called the Scully effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but when the X-Files came out, it depicted a female scientist, which wasn't like the first time that happened, but after that, it was called the Scully effect, where a huge increase of girls wanted to be scientists.
Representation matters. Broad sociological studies on representation conclude throughout them all, we don't have to bring up any of them. Look up any of them. Any social study that is on the concept of representation and how it manifests in people's choices will show you that it matters in terms of equity. It is absolutely important. And all the media that we're making today, like the last 10 years of media, do you agree? Because I think I'm right about this. It is more socially conscious and better written and dealing with actual like real issues more often than anything back in the day. NASA relied super heavily on computers, and computers were historically women. That's right. That's right, they are.
There is a social
Every
component
computer
here.
has a
It's a
place.
lot easier and almost lazier to just say, it's just brains, men are men, women are women, okay? It's a lot more difficult to contend with what we can actually change.
Nobody's denying that men and women are free to pursue the roles as they will, but we know that throughout, 800 BC to 1950 AD, virtually 95% of all technological and scientific innovation came from European men. The idea that that was happening because they were allowed
Just saying 95% of everything came from European men is a wild fucking
to, and all these
lie.
great ideas were just being shut out of the discussion. It's just frankly not true. Also, the idea that negative stereotypes are preventing women from going into these fields, we know that's not true as well. There have been several studies proving that if you discourage women, you can't be a scientist, you can't be a doctor. It literally does not affect either their performance nor their interest in those fields. There was a study, though, recently in 2021 that tried to review all of that and say, no, this actually is the case, and then they got caught fabricating their numbers. In terms of the X-Files thing, maybe, but I mean, that's the 1990s. Look, I mean, you're reaching like the peak of when all this messaging, which I can't believe you deny the fact. There are institutions, grants, funding, all these organizations telling women you can.
The 90s was the peak of telling women that they can go into STEM fields? Okay. I guess I just disagree.
can be a doctor, you can be a scientist. When's the last time you saw a straight white man in a commercial? It doesn't exist. All of the programming in this country
wait, hold on.
is
I
pro-feminine.
recognize that you're trying to go down the special snowflake route here, okay? But before we start playing
He never left 2016.
there are
That's
still
his problem.
there are still massive amounts of white males on TV, okay? I'm pretty confident about that one. But again, even if these institutions are trying to push forward an idea that women can do it, you're ignoring the social component. There is, in fact, different social expectations and stigmas. And I keep going back to the stay-at-home dad thing because you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. You're saying there's not really much of a social stigma, but then you're perpetuating the social stigma. You're trying to discourage people from pursuing these career fields. And I don't know why that is. Women are not a slave to their
First
biology.
of all, on the stay-at-home dads thing, I have no ill will or disrespect towards dads who are staying at home. What I am discouraging is the idea that these roles are malleable and it's a simple coin toss. I am saying that men and women flourish best when they are.
It's not a coin toss. No one's saying it's a coin toss. They're saying specifically whatever you want to do. Do what you want to do. It's not a coin toss. It's a choice. You make the choice. Not me. I'm not coin tossing you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do.
Following their roles when they are pursuing what is complementary to them in their nature.
What are their roles? That changes. What a role is, what a role is for a man has changed significantly.
And you say that, but that's not actually true. It may have changed in terms of things like attire, aesthetics, penis size, but what doesn't change is the fundamental role of the man as the protector and the provider. Even in the societies where men are spending the most time with children, the nurturers, I believe it's like the Aka pygmies in Africa, even then, the males are only spending about 40 minutes a day with the child, and the women are still spending 10 times amount that time. So you can say that, oh, the differences are malleable. The big differences are not. I don't really care what some guy's hairstyle was or what his statue was looking like. The biological reality of our situation, as articulated, has remained the same, and it's only changing, not in that all of a sudden women are becoming men and things like that. It's just that now they're not attracted to each other and they're not getting married because of that actual social pressure and actual social conditioning, which you seem to want to ignore.
No, there's a reason why people are getting married later. Again, it can largely be attributed to economic reasons. We can't just point to a problem and just blame whatever we want to blame. It's largely because of economic reasons.
Yeah, everybody agrees that it's economic. You ask anybody about what keeps them from starting a family, and it's I don't have a house or the money to do it. Maybe not even health insurance, stuff like that.
Why people are getting married later in life. And again, I am not denying biology. You keep going back to this. However, you're really going to tell me that there was a time when it was masculine to cry. There was a time when what it meant to be a man, how you were expected to behave, was different. Just if there are some similarities as far as the protective nature, I'm fine with that. Again, a lot of that can be attributed to, yes, biology, testosterone. If you are stronger and by protecting your family, you need to be physically able to fight someone off, yeah, the male's probably going to be the protector. No shit. However, that's one, not necessarily the case nowadays. And two, we would then want to talk about what does it even mean to be the protector? There are different ways to protect a family. Not all of it is physical protection. And so what it means to be a man, how men are expected to behave, has changed. It's different.
Oh, that's good.
Nowadays,
Good job,
boys are not encouraged to show emotion. It's considered very weak. It's considered feminine. It's considered girly. But yet, I point to the example of, yes, where it used to be chivalrous for men to weep. It was called chivalrous weeping. And that was a thing. That was a masculine trait. So there can be biological consistencies across human history. I'm fine with that.
Aragorn comes to mind.
I'm more interested in talking about what we can change. What can we do to make society better? And by acknowledging that there are certain social expectations that we place on people, we expect them to act a certain way. If we can acknowledge that, that means we can also change these things. We can make it so that families are more stable. We can make it so that if a man unfortunately loses his job, he's not more likely to get divorced because his self-esteem is suddenly in the toilet.
Get you a man who would cry at your wedding and also murder somebody to protect you, okay? Just saying. We can do both. We don't have to be only caregivers or aggro murder freaks. We can be both.
We can make these changes. We can make the world a better place.
Oh, well, I like that. We can all go home on a good note, can't we? In terms of the emotional aspect of it, I have never
Can we nudge his fucking camera or something? These people are ridiculous.
heard or witnessed anybody see a man crying at his father's funeral or at the birth of his child and being like, man up, pussy. That's like this sort of like...
You keep doing it. No one says that men shouldn't cry at their father's funeral. Dude.
No, but what they do say,
it is
men
want
that
to express emotion by crying.
If a man is crying at like the ceremony you mentioned, the chivalrous ceremony, no one is going to turn an eye to that then. The same way as something I guess would be the equivalent now. No one would
chivalrous ceremony.
turn an eye to that negatively. The same way now, if you have men crying over things like, I'm like really nervous about this test, or back then like, I don't want to do jousting practice, like, yeah, okay, quit being a little bitch. Like there's a reason that stoicism is a virtue. As a man, you have to be stoic because, like we mentioned in the baby studies, when something goes down, maybe it's changed, and maybe you have a gun, maybe police are there. I don't know. It depends on what city. People look to you for the answer. People look to you for protection. The little baby girls look.
That's not true. I am a man, and people do look to me for that, but I don't look to other men for that. That's not true. There are only a few people in this world who are truly in charge when they're around. And sadly, against my wishes, it seems to be the case that I'm one of them. Everybody always puts me in charge of shit. It is not because I'm stoic. I'm not stoic. Do I come across as particularly stoic to you, chat? son of a bitch, man.
Look to the little baby boys more often than vice versa. That's why stoicism is a virtue as a man. Being in control of your emotions to portray strength is, even if you are weak. No one's saying that weakness is a problem, but you have an obligation to those
Come across a stoic, you don't spend a lot of time here then.
around you as a man to portray strength, even if that's not the case.
This is just
also,
wrong. You're doing it right now.
Also,
this idea that because you're a man, you have a responsibility to
Real?
portray strength
Yes,
all
you
the
do.
time.
That is true.
No, that is not true. And you're once again enforcing this idea. This is what leads to the repressing emotions.
Stone dick.
Mechanism,
Yes.
which has already been demonstrated to increase likelihood of committing suicide.
okay, that's not true. The reason men are killing themselves isn't because they can't talk about their emotions.
I cried on stream the other day, like like 3 weeks ago, when, what was it? Someone was experiencing gender euphoria, and it really got to me. I don't remember what the fuck it was. It was just like a little video. We watched it together. It's been lots of times here. What the fuck does stoic mean to you, Andy? I think here's the problem. It was John Oliver. That's right. Yeah. Here's the problem. That's not what stoic means. Anyway, it was a really cute video.
Let's dispel with this fiction that that's the reason that that's going on. Men are killing themselves because we see no way forward. It is harder for us to achieve the economic prospects that our fathers or that our grandmothers have, which Hunter
Capitalism!
is right. It is because of things like offshoring manufacturing, frankly, gender bias in terms of higher education, things like that. Men just don't see the prospects. And if men don't see a way out of a situation, we are more likely to be despondent. We are more likely to kill ourselves. Also, what's very important about that, in terms of the male suicide and how that relates to emotion, like we mentioned earlier, when men were held to the highest standards of how they were supposed to behave as men in the 1950s, they weren't killing themselves as often. They weren't as depressed as often. This is like a new invention for whatever reason.
Because
And
a lot of the
Because they had economic... Look, he's so mad. They had economic fucking opportunities in the 50s. What? And only white men. Like, we're only coming from this from a white cis het perspective. And male. Like, it's not true of anybody else.
well, hold on. A lot of the problems here is that some of the expectations are being almost accentuated. So we have social media, which is isolating people. We still have social expectations that you as a man have a responsibility to give off the impression that you're strong at all times. These things all compounded. Yes, the economy. All of these issues compounded lead to more negative outcomes.
I don't know why the
specifically
50s
for
are
men. Even more so,
this
hold on.
height
They've
of
done
male
studies where
standards. I
they've
don't
literally
know.
shown that men are less likely to go to the fucking doctor because they perceive that as being weak.
Yeah.
These are the type of
Based.
ideas.
That is. I'll walk it off. That's funny.
You can't always walk. Some of it you can walk off, but not always.
One thing I want to get into, and I think this is an interesting phenomenon that we've witnessed often. Well, so that too, I mean, that is men. I don't think it's necessarily weakness. You know, I'm sure the men in the audience, it's not necessarily weakness like, oh, the doctor's going to think of. It's more just like who cares? You know, who cares? I think that women tend to be more sort of on the ball with those things, which is good.
Well,
They're
why do men
nurturing, they're
die more?
empathetic, they're like,
Men
you're
die
hurt.
earlier.
You don't even know it. I'm going to tell you that. And men are like, nah, I'm not hurt. And then it is the case. But here's something interesting.
Men die earlier, John.
I think that anybody, well, it's because we're taking more risks because of our testosterone. By the way, testosterone isn't just I'm doing manual labor. It's your risk aversion. It's your ambition. It's your competition levels. It's everything. And women have less than that, and that's why they are the way that they are, which is lovely, by the way. We love women, don't we, folks? Everyone loves women. No one loves them more than me. That is a fact.
I don't think you can claim to be the guy who loves women the most if none of them ever let you touch them. You know, like if you got a dry dick, you cannot be telling me that you're a big lover of women, my guy.
It's something I did want to get into. This is a very interesting social phenomenon that we're seeing, where I think, even if Hunter may disagree, I don't think he does, there is a
Ridiculous.
monopoly.
Time's up.
Can I continue with my 5 minutes?
Well, you have 5 minutes next, so you can continue then, yes. We're starting the second
that's not
segment.
fair at
We're
all.
so back.
We have-
Trust the plan.
I'm gonna start crying right here, right now.
Well,
And I will embrace you. I will understand this is very traumatic for you. There is a very interesting phenomenon going on.
this will be your 5 seconds, by the way. We're starting the second segment, so you have 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Trust the plan. Okay. There's a very interesting phenomenon occurring now, which is you see throughout all of the institutions, literally a monopoly. I mean, we're told, whether it's in the mainstream media or in education, counselors we used to have to meet with when I was like 7 years old talking about all these things that children typically wouldn't have thought of before our country became so backwards. Men are taught from a very young age the opposite of what he's claiming with this vague narrative of society. Men are taught it's okay to be soft and tender, express emotions. Men typically don't want to do that. What men like to do when they express emotions is go, this sucks. I'm upset. I'm going to try to channel that in a way that's more productive. They don't like it when you do that because that implies a threat to, frankly, their established power.
Men don't fucking try to... What do you mean? It's so weird to me. Like, just making up lies about dudes. Have you been around dudes before? As a fella, been around a few dudes in my life. Never in my life have I seen dudes get mad about stuff and then go, you know what, I'm going to channel this in a proper way. They're punching walls and shit. And they're saying, fuck this shit. Calling, they're like, oh, you don't want to text me, you're a whore. Like, what do you mean? These they're boys. Men, my peers, regularly disappointing. And not because they're fucking toxic or whatever, because they're fucking babies, dude. They have the emotions of fucking children. Because they're not allowed to fucking develop any of this shit in any positive manner. All of this is like John Doyle shit right here. Just drives me nuts, dude. There are so few men equipped to deal with genuine trauma. Like, it's not okay. I have so many dudes in my life over the years that could have benefited from like positive coping mechanisms, positivity among their friend groups. I'm very lucky in that not only have I helped foster, but so have my friends helped foster a supportive community of dudes, all of which are cis, I think, and all of which, save for a couple, are het. So, like, it's not unachievable. Men could be well served by getting their bullshit, like getting this kind of shit and just dismissing it, dude. If you're a man and you're like, oh, I'm a big alpha boy, I'm an alpha, but you take advice from this guy who is not that, my friend, I'm sorry to inform you, but you are not, in fact, an alpha. You are my bitch. I will be the one in charge in the room again, just like always. I'll be walking through the door first. You'll be deferring to me for decisions, just like all these fucking people. Every time. An alpha is not a man who could beat everybody else up in the room. An alpha is the one man in the room who has competent fucking social skills.
Structure, men getting together and going, this is wrong, I want to change it. And so here's an interesting phenomenon. Look at Jordan Peterson. This guy was teaching at a university in Canada, all of a sudden becomes an overnight sensation. Now he speaks to sold-out arenas, missed me, all throughout the world. Sold-out arenas all throughout the world, and he's teaching young men not to embrace their emotions and whine, but rather get it together, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And his audience is overwhelmingly male. Why is that resonating with young men? Or guys like Andrew Tate. He goes viral overnight telling men, you have to get it together, you have to be better. Contrast this with the self-help literature for women. If you've ever thumbed through one...
I think you should get it together, too. We just have massively different understandings of what that means. Empathy is how you get it together. Understanding that other people have context to their lives and trying very hard to make sure that you understand that when someone has like something going on in their life, including yourself, there can be validity to it and it can be wrong at the same time. Like being scared of something in the dark. You're validly scared, right? Your amygdala's firing, your fight or flight's going, your anxiety's up, you're ready to fucking stab something or run away from it or hide or whatever. But there's nothing there, it's just the dark. You don't have to be embarrassed that you were scared of something. You don't have to like and there's a million things like that where you might be, from your perspective, you might be validly upset about something, but the reality of it is that you don't need to be upset because it's not a situation. And you know what I'm talking about. Just there's so many social situations that come up in life where, oh, I was really upset, and then it turned out, well, I maybe didn't have to be that upset about this thing.
One of these, it really is a sobering experience, boys. All of their rhetoric is not,
Peterson's
you need to do this, you need to be taking cold showers, you suck, get better. And guys are like, yes. You read the ones that are written for women, it's all like, you deserve to feel like you matter, and you deserve to feel this, and you are entitled to this, which is great. That's
not just for women. That's for everybody. You absolutely deserve to feel your emotions. This is a gender neutral advice, guys. Your emotions are things that are going to happen without your consent. Let's be real. So it's interesting that we detach our emotions from us, right? We go, that's an emotion I'm having. Like, and you can even sit outside of it while you're feeling it. You can be like, damn, I'm sad. I don't want to be sad, but I'm sad that I'm sad. And then you spiral. You guys know how this is. Like, there's just, we're complex creatures. And I don't think, John, that ignoring the complexity of the human psyche is a smart path forward.
Is what women need to hear, but let's not pretend that these two things are the same. Like we mentioned with their depression, women feel more depressed when they feel like they are not able to contribute to the well-being of those around them. Men feel depressed when we feel like, I don't know what they're doing, but like, I know I'm screwed and there's no way out of this. And that's just the reality of our situation. And I think that if maybe how much time do I have? Oh, okay, we'll do it. My Type 15, right? My open mic. If you had situations where all of a sudden people were coming out with this new idea of like, guys, what if we could just like.
Do you guys hear that? I don't know if you could hear it. Darwin was having a nightmare.
Cry. Why would you then not see that overnight viral sensation with people who hadn't heard that and gone, wait a minute, this one guy is talking about that, I'm going to follow that. If it were really true that there's this big monopoly of Jordan Peterson's being like, don't cry, man up, you'd expect someone like Hunter Avallone to come onto the scene and be like, actually, you can cry. And then all of a sudden, he would be speaking to sold-out arenas. But this just isn't the case. There is a monopoly, as evidenced by those who break through as dissenting voices, all of a sudden basically achieving like the
He's appealing to popularity? So because Jordan Peterson exists and it resonates with some shitters, all of sociology and psychology is wrong.
Higher market share because it just doesn't exist, because men are taught now that they're supposed to embrace their feelings and be sad and that's okay, and women are taught that like, well, you're supposed to be more assertive and less agreeable and things like that, and this is fine. Men can be like that, women can be like that, but ultimately it is against our nature. And when we start LARPing as these like androgynous freaks, we're less likely to get married. Sure, if the economic prospects were fixed, you'd see more marriages, but it cannot be understated that men know that the state of the modern woman is not so good. And women definitely know that the state of the modern man is also not so good. I mean, the average modern man is like this overweight, porn-addicted slob, and you're like, where's my trad wife? And it doesn't exist. Moreover, the average woman, you know, the birth control, the SSRIs, she's just like all over the place. That's why these social trends through the sexual revolution, by the way, that's inarguable, that's consensus, that these things have happened, and that is bad. So we actually do have in our power to make the world a better place. We can undo that conditioning. We can undo that propaganda. When me and my cool friends take power, we will.
You have 5 minutes.
All right, so I think that you said something like men are taught to be in touch with their feelings and talk about their feelings. I recognize that colloquially, emotions and feelings are used interchangeably. I use them interchangeably before, too. However, there actually is a difference between feelings and emotions. So emotions specifically refer to, and John, you're going to love this, a biological response, actual brain chemistry that responds to certain things. This is why sadness is one of the fundamental emotions, whereas anger is actually a secondary emotion. It is still a real emotion, but it's largely because it comes from an underlying foundational emotion. Feelings, on the other hand, are purely conscious. These are things, yes, that you feel in your head, you think about, they're not actually, there's not a biological response. So is there a time and a place to be open and vulnerable about your emotion?
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes, of course. I am not saying that men should just be crying every day, all day, any chance they get. Neither should women. Everybody should have a grasp and control over their emotions, but that's called emotional intelligence. And part of being emotionally intelligent is also recognizing the time and the place where it is appropriate to be vulnerable, whether it's with friends or a partner, where it is okay to cry and express sadness. This should not be something that is always looked down upon. It should not be something that men are expected to be stoic at all times. These are harmful ideals. They lead to, I know I've already said this, but they lead to repressing emotions, and that increases likelihood of suicide, mental health problems, etc. You also talk about how a lot of the institutions are against this idea or the ideas of masculinity that you're pushing for because masculine men are sort of a threat to the institutions. I don't know where you're getting this from because especially throughout the past 100 years or so, every massive threat to the institutions or the mainstream has been people vocalizing their problems. So if you want to talk about MLK, he challenged the institutions at the time, and that was done vocally. That was not done because he had some
John does not like MLK.
Physical, muscular strength or because he was suppressing his emotions. That didn't happen. People have risen to power time and time again through rhetoric and through being able to win over a crowd rather than being the most muscular, tall, buff dude who's never emotional. You also mentioned earlier, not in the thing you just said, but beforehand, you talked about men sometimes will feel depressed because they fail to... You missed me also, I don't know.
Let's go.
But you also said earlier that like maybe men feel depressed if they're not providing because they're failing to live up to this role, and maybe they...
I'll be gone when you get back, Annie.
I know you didn't say maybe they
Have a
should
good
feel
time.
depressed, but you said maybe they feel this way because, yeah, they are failing. We decide what these roles are for men. We have decided that the role is going to be
Yeah, the audio gunshot was in the video.
You as a man.
Even he responded.
to be the primary breadwinner.
what he was just
This
doing.
does not necessarily have to be the role for a man. So it sounds almost like what you said earlier there that almost kind of proves my point, that when you fail to meet or live up to these arbitrary roles, you worsen your own mental well-being. You raise the likelihood of divorce. And I don't know why you would be in favor of any of that. Let me see if there's anything else I have here. At the end of the day, I just think it's really important to, again, recognize that biology is real. There's a difference between males and females. Anybody claiming otherwise is delusional. There is a difference between males and females. However, we are not a slave to our biology. We are not a slave to evolution. And women, when they are forced in these roles that are usually seen as more natural for their biology, do not always do well because it's the enforcement that is the problem. It's not necessarily the gender roles that are the problem.
John, you have 5 minutes.
You mentioned stoicism. Kind of. Stoicism is good. I meant to elaborate on this earlier, particularly with men, because our strength gives us a little bit more of an edge than women. And our strength has potential to be bad. So if we're not in control of our emotions, things could get bad for those around us pretty quickly. Now, if you take women and give them a little bit of testosterone, which is how you get lesbians, they have the highest rate of domestic abuse, female-female relationships. I don't know if you know that. That is a fact. Repressing emotions, again, has literally no link to suicide. If you look at the people who now are committing suicide, it's not because they didn't think that they could talk about their emotions, well, the men in particular, or because they thought that everything was just so doom and gloom and there's no outlet. It is because they see no way forward. That is why during the highest standard.
No. Women ages 18 to 24 and 25 to 34 generally experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence. I can't imagine that all of them are lesbians. Does he mean per capita? I don't even know how to find that. Domestic violence stats. Fun fact to prove Doyle wrong with the 50s, the honeymooners had a running joke where the husband was constantly tempted to hit his wife. So yeah, selling your wife super normal. Oh, of course it was. I mean, we all know that. Let's see. According to the CDC, more than 1 in 3 women, 35.6%, and more than 1 in 4 men, 28.5%, in the U.S. have experienced abuse by their partner to varying degrees. Rape, physical violence, and or stalking. Intimate partner violence amounts to 15% of all violent crime. Half of both have experienced psychological aggression, of course. Makes sense, me too. I would say that's 100%. I would be very surprised to say only half of all people have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lives. Of those that have had intimate partners, only half have experienced psychological aggression. I'm going to say that this is a tool that they just don't have the language for in their head. Psychological aggression is so common in relationships, especially as you're a young person sort of figuring out how to communicate and shit. That seems pretty, it's maybe defined pretty, every year, an estimated 324,000 women are pregnant when they are subjected to violence by an intimate partner. You know, the lesbians. You know how lesbians knock up their partners and then beat them up? True.
Standards of that type of society says you can't do this, which would be like virtually any year from our history, probably even human history, up until the 1950s and 1960s, men weren't committing suicide at even comparable rates to what they are now. So the only thing that changed is that Hunter's ideas became normalized through the long march of the institutions, and my ideas didn't. And now all of a sudden men are committing suicide. To which this will say, well, you can't just attribute it to one problem. And it's like, well, I'm not. I mean, you look at the state of who's committing the most suicide in this country, it's white men. Why is that? White men are demonized in virtually every institution. They are taught that they are lesser than, they're not as cool, unique as women or people of color or whatever. And because of that, they don't see a way forward. They are literally discriminated against.
Bro, I don't experience discrimination like that. No one tells me... Dude. There is this fallacy that happens. And this is how we're going to end this, because I have to go to the airport. So this is how this video ends right here, because I can't finish the rest of this. After this, I believe, is Q&A. Yeah, it's Q&A stuff. If you guys want to watch the Q&A to this, that's right after this, we can. There's a little bit more time that they go back and forth for a second, but it's you get what you get. Doyle should wear a cowboy hat to up his appeal. True. Wait, hold on one sec.
They're lesser than, they're not as cool, unique as women or people of
color.
color.
That, yeah. I had to make sure I kept my train of thought. So... people like John, white nationalists, people like John have this interesting reaction to pushback of white nationalism because, John is of the mind that, European men, of course, white men, European men are responsible for 95% of stuff, and they're powerful, and they're all these good things, and, there's nothing really bad about men in general. We have no problems among manhood. It's fine. We don't have to really... The only bad things about men are when they're not man enough, okay? No one has ever told me, and I'm a lefty, so I'm surrounded by these fuckers, okay? These goddamn lefty cockroaches. These goddamn Caucasians. No one has ever told me that I'm inherently dog shit for being white. What is happening, John, is people are saying that although you may not be inherently dog shit for being right, the white nationalist, white exceptionalism is being pushed back on. So not being inherently the best thing does not mean that you're the worst thing. He's got some Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights mentality going on. If you're not first, you're last, apparently, in John Doyle's brain. It just seems like like the ideas of a weak man to blame other people for your own self-worth here. I thought men were supposed to be stoic, but you seem to get worried every time the feminazis talk about it, right? Those goddamn feminazis. Forest Espion. John, if the TV and social media ain't showing us straight white men are the coolest people, we will KYS. True. Jake, your thoughts on this? That's true. Thank you for the 100 biddies. It keeps me going. Anyway, chat, you get it at this point. There's a little Q&A. If later tonight you guys want to watch the Q&A, we'll do it. But I have to go to the airport right now and pick up Sarah. And that's a good thing because I love her and I miss her.